have here Charlie Williams. Charlie Williams is an artist from the UK and the US that came here like in already 2 months ago, I think. And he came here committed to develop his project under the theme Life-Changing Microbiomes. He had a set idea, and during these 2 months of residency, he has been gathering information from different scientists, from different people, from different students at Wageningen University. But not only this, he did something more, and he also applied for a TED Talk. And thanks to his great public speaking skills, he got a spot on the evening of TEDx Wageningen University. So we will have Charlie Williams back in November. He has collaborated with Victor Martin dos Santos, with Diana Machado de Souza, and with Sabine Rigor, among others. And let's see what this collaboration with the scientists, along with the idea of Charlie Williams, what came out of all of this. Sure. I give you the floor and give him a warm applause, please.
Hi, so as Francisco said, I've been here for 8 weeks now, working on this project. And this is the sort of denouement, the farewell, here's what it was. I want to tell you a bit about what the concept was going into it, go through what scientists I talked to, and then I'll tell the story of kind of how the whole piece came together over the 8 weeks, including a tour of some of the hardware and the software aspects of it. And then at the end of my portion, I want to talk about what sort of synthetic digital organisms and what biomimesis means, and invite the scientists here, as well as any the rest of you, to have a conversation about how biology relates to this and vice versa. So the plan that I had going into this was to make some kind of art that was inspired by biology, pretty generally. And I mean, the sort of the initial prompt, this life-changing microbiomes, has a very wide remit. And so, looking at some of this and doing some of the reading and just sort of background knowledge, I wanted to make some sort of biomorphic circuit art. I was inspired particularly by mycorrhizae, the underground fungal networks that trees use to communicate. Not being a scientist, I heard about it on Radiolab, the podcast. I know that's sort of what brought it, I think, to the public consciousness. If you're a fungus or tree scientist, then you like that band before it was cool, sort of thing. So I looked at some of these biomorphic shapes and ways of communicating, and kind of tied that to some of my previous work in sculpture and in software and hardware, and I began to see connections between this sort of emergent behavior that you saw and some of the emergent behavior that you see in the human organism, and how we all relate collectively. I'll come back to that toward the end. But this idea of agents acting to create something that they don't intend and that they can't even really comprehend. That when you have individuals working within a group, sometimes none of the individuals has a plan for what happens, and none of them even knows really what it is that's happening, but then you see this emergent behavior above it. So I showed up here and I met my co-artist in residence at the villa. I met some great scientists. I had a lot of really fascinating conversations, learning about everything from terrifying parasitic wasps to a kid's book called Bug Buds, which I definitely need to get for my 2-year-old. But what became clear at the beginning of the 8 weeks is that the engineering aspect of the challenge that I set was really formidable, and that I was going to need to first make sure that I could solve that in the 8 weeks, and then kind of invite the conversation to continue from there, and in terms of refining the idea, bringing more ideas from biology into the idea, and kind of taking it from there. So what that means is that most of the time that I spent here was solving engineering challenges, and I haven't actually had as many conversations as I'd like to with scientists. I haven't been able to really do a kind of iterative thing. And so I see the conversations that I've had so far as a jumping off point. And even though I'm going back to the UK on Saturday, I hope that this idea continues and this project continues, and I hope that I can have more conversations about this as it continues to be refined with the scientists I've spoken with so far and potentially others. So if you have ideas, I'm going to make this more explicit toward the end, but if you have ideas that relate to this, definitely feel free to come talk to me. I mentioned the technical challenge, and let me tell you a bit about what that was. There are a few people here who this is going to be old hat for, but a lot of people I talk to are really curious about what is this process? How do you make this electronic thing? So I'll go over this quickly. The first thing you do designing a circuit is to kind of specify it in an abstract way, like you see on the left. So everything here has to do with function, and really none of it, or almost none of it, has to do with form. This is all just like, what are the things going to do? And in doing that, you make a lot of decisions in terms of what components you can use and how to link it together and how to make a valid circuit. And then once you've done that, then you can make this design file on the right, which hopefully is not too bright to see, but this is like where the things are and how the wires actually go between them. So if you said like A has to connect to B over here, it could, do I have a laser pointer on this? Yeah, it could be like, A and B are like right next to each other. It could be like A and B. And if it's A and B, then you have to draw a wire somehow that connects those over the course of your circuit. And all these wires have to go on, in this case, just 2 planes, and they need to not, they can't touch, right? So you have this kind of like a crossword almost of like, how do you get all the wires to the right point without, in a valid way. So this is then what you send to a fabricator in order to get a printed circuit board back. Which I'll show you in a second. Let's see, I'm actually going to skip this bit, whatever. So when you have this this design, there's like a dry fit step also where you basically print it out at size and you put all your components on it just to make sure that they are in fact the right size. The footprint for the components. So this is a printout on paper, but you can see I've laid a few of these tiny little things on there. Because sometimes you have something where it turns out the footprint's wrong, or the footprint's right, but the device itself kind of does this over the footprint, and then you have another one next to it, and it turns out they bump into each other. And just to be clear, sending something to a fabricator, for me, means a fabricator in Shenzhen, in China, who then can build it in a couple of days, but then it takes about a week to get here. And to be able to send a file to someone in China and get a physical circuit in a week is amazing, but it's not as fast as just printing. So it still is a pretty big step to say, right, let's make one of these. So you want to do things like this to make sure that it's going to work. I didn't always catch everything, but that's just an insight into that. What I had when I got here, I was extremely fortunate to be introduced through Robert, who I saw here a second ago. There he is, hey Robert. To Hans at the Technical Development Studio. Is that the official name? People also call it the Verkplatz, which is this sort of wizardry, sort of makery studio here, which is also, as I understand it, a business sort of ensconced within the campus that does work for various research happening here and also for some external companies. And I saw some really impressive stuff there. It's such a cool place. And the point for this is that I was able to build some prototypes at their lab. Aside from them being nice people, without that connection, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this project. I would have had to just have a different idea and do some other art, which I'm full of ideas, but like this is the idea I wanted to do, so it was really good to have it's specialized equipment, and that's pretty critical to what this is to building these circuits. So this is what you get back from Shenzhen, and I always forget to explain this because I look at these all the time. But if you aren't used to seeing this sort of thing, which is understandable, this is like the blank sheet of paper, in a sense, that you put electronic components on. So in the fabricator in Shenzhen isn't building an electronic thing for me, they're making something that I can put electronic components on. And so it has all these footprints for where I need to put the components, and then there's wires built into it that connect all the bits that need to be connected. So I get that, and then the way that you assemble this is you get a custom-made like steel stencil, and you get solder paste or solder paste, depending on which pronunciation you favor. And you smear this metal alloy kind of suspended in a flux chemical over it. And that lets all the feet of the components stick just in the right places, so they're bonded permanently with metal to the circuit board. And it's electrical glue, essentially. You connect them with that, you bake it at a really specific temperature. And so this is where the kind of specialized equipment comes in, because you have this machine that is essentially a really precise oven. It ramps up at a specific speed to the temperature where that paste will melt, but not to the temperature where any of your components will burn up. And the difference between that is sometimes just a couple of degrees. So these lights especially are notorious for just popping. They're optical, they let in radiation, they're black or on the edge, they can melt. So thankfully, I don't think I melted any of them. So yeah, that precise control is really important. It's also just while we're talking about the physical aspect of this, it's hard to capture in a photograph how tiny these things are. So these are microscope photographs. I use the microscope in some cases to read the text on chips when I need to sort of make sure that I had what I thought I had. And also to look for what we call bridged pins, where you have two of these things that have become connected, but they aren't supposed to be connected. And that's the thing that you can repair afterwards, but it's a sort of extra step, and if you don't repair it, then your whole board can be fried. It's like if you drop your phone in the water, and it's like, well, that one goes in the bin, you make another one. I ended up making 4 prototype versions in the end. It's kind of sorted out different issues. You build one, some of it works, then this part of it doesn't work, so then you refine and you find another thing that doesn't work. One thing that I found over the course of doing this is that I kind of learned about this PCB design, is that I always thought of it as a final product. Like, you have this circuit board, and you know exactly what it's going to do by the time you build it. And that's how it works in sort of professionally made products, like your phone. Like, they know sort of what route the signal is going to take when they make it. But in this kind of prototyping, what I learned is that the thing to do is to maintain flexibility for as long as you can. So one of the things that I did, I had here, I had this idea that the boards would be physically connected, and then here I was like, no, they're going to talk using infrared light, so there's going to be no physical connection. And then here I was sort of trying to sort out some problems with the infrared. And then I thought here, when I was going to the 4th one, I thought, this might not work. They might need to be physically connected. And so I put in the option for both. So there was a connection point for wires and a connection point for infrared. And as it turned out, not only does being wired work better, the initial concept that I had for them to be wired was pretty visually important. It was when I assembled them all, not having the physical connection, it wasn't immediately apparent that these are all networked, that these are sort of talking to each other. Having the physical connection there, I'd sort of forgotten in my excitement about infrared that was conceptually important at the beginning of the work. So it was glad in a way that I was reminded by physics that I had to do that. But because of the amount of time it takes to do these, I didn't have time in the 8 weeks for a 5th prototype run. So I knew when I was doing that one, like, this one has to work. I have to do something so that it works. So I put in both, and it was great because I had them all doing infrared, and then I thought, you know what, we're going to wire them, and it was just ready to go. I just connected wires. The original plan, is this going to work? The original plan was to build 4 or 5 of the boards to verify this design, and then to have the fabrication done in Shenzhen. Like I mentioned, what I ordered for prototyping was just the bare boards, but you can get assembly done, of course, there too. You send them the design file and what goes where, and just build it for you. But what I learned in doing that was that it was basically a 6-week lead time. I think if you're making 100,000 of something, you can maybe get around that, or if you just have a huge budget. But a 6-week lead time within an 8-week residency doesn't really work. So I ended up making all of them by hand. This is supposed to be a video of the machine that builds them in Shenzhen because it's amazing. It's so fast. Imagine it. Look it up. It's called a pick-and-place machine. If you haven't seen one, YouTube it. They're insane. Anyway, this is me not actually building boards, but putting the boards together. So I did a lot of this. So I built 21 of the final version of the board. There's actually 18 in the version in forum, so I had 3 spares. And when you take that together with the previous prototypes, that's 2,500 hand-placed components of tweezers. So each board has about 100 parts. I'm really glad to be done with that. I think building a few is okay, but building that many is just, it's being a factory, and that's just kind of grueling. So anyway, this is, as they start to come together, it's very exciting having, you build one, and early in the process, you build one, some of it works, some of it doesn't work, and you're like, well, okay, time for the next one. You built that one, and then you wait another. You sort of spend most of a week probably fixing it, and then a week waiting for the next one, and then you build the next one, and something else doesn't work. So when it all finally worked, it was like, great, this is, oh, and the other thing about that is that when you order these, it's, practically speaking, it's the same price to get one as it is to get 10 or 20. So I think the first prototype run I just got maybe 5 or something, but it's like a few extra euros. So for each one, it's sort of like, well, this might work. So I might as well pay a few extra euros to get all. So I had all the circuit boards ready to go for this, kind of for each of the later prototype runs. And so to finally be able to use those boards was great. This just workspace shot, why not? Looks nice. This is my studio in Impulse, where I did the software side of the development. And the software side is a whole other, really the other half of all of this. I have a lot of photos of the physical build, because you can take photos, and oh, here's the physical thing that I did today. You don't really take a photo of your software. So I'm going to talk through the software function, but I don't really have sort of this same sort of visual thing for the story of how it came together. The other thing, though, is that it came together really smoothly, because I do software professionally when I'm gigging. And so the software side of it was not nearly as much of a challenge for this project. One of the things, though, that for those of you who've worked with anything sort of digital, you think about storage space, and storage space is usually in our lives now, it's gigabytes or terabytes, or if you're looking at an individual file, it's maybe megabytes. If you shoot a photo and it's, I don't know, 2 megabytes, 5 megabytes. So the software that I was writing, you can see here the maximum that I had is just under 31 kilobytes. And so I was, I was doing okay there. But the amount of sort of runtime memory that I had to work with was 2K, 2 kilobytes, which is just, like, we've all sent emails bigger than that. So it's very, there's a lot of constraints, and I find that really exciting and fun to work with. But That said, I would probably pick a chip that had more memory next time. Because it's just, sometimes, constraints can be fun, sometimes constraints can be constraining. Right, so I have these boards, and I've determined the sort of the shape and the function, and at some point I'm going to have to actually put them in relationship to each other. They need to have a pattern or an arrangement. These are just some of the ones I consider. The thing I was starting out with this was sort of these sort of stretched grids, like this one and that one. And then I did some swoopy curve kind of things. The version that I went with, which you'll see in the photos here, and you can see it for them, is really based on each individual relationship between two boards being as harmonious as possible, for whatever definition of harmonious is in here. But that, I was doing that and sort of realized what I was doing, because often you don't think, I didn't think, I'm going to do grids. It was just like, I'm laying them out like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a grid. Okay, let's play some more grids. But this thing with the harmony, sort of each one trying to have a harmonious relationship with its neighbors, has a kind of microbiological feel to me, where it's sort of, there isn't necessarily a grand plan, but there's a bunch of individual little plans. So at a certain point, I couldn't do just do layouts on the computer anymore. I needed to physically play with these objects. So I went to the Fab Lab here, and the laser cutter there was broken. So I messaged Robert again, and he introduced me to Marcel, who knew how to wrangle, how to convince a broken laser cutter to work. So I got my parts, and I could make a maquette, which is an art world word for mock-up. We say in French, obviously, because we're artists. And what I used this for was to look at the best balance, not only the relationship between them, but the best balance between filled space and empty space. Like, how big of a canvas am I going to put these on? Because I was practically constrained to about 20 boards. And so it's, is it going to go on something, 3 meters or 1 meter, or, how's that going to work best? So I could have quite easily, I could have different sizes of cardboard and just say, this is all at 1/3 size of the actual boards, and so I could just, how does it look roughly with this, how does it look with this, and then really precisely place them. Part of this too was realizing that, so in my original concept, and in the sort of existing final concept for this, these boards are all like permanently installed into a wall. They're like wired in, so each one has electricity going to it. And that is a kind of engineering facilities job that I don't blame the university for not jumping at, especially for a kind of temporary thing. That's a really permanent kind of thing. So what I decided to build was a frame and have them mounted so that it would be portable, it would be contained, and I could handle all the electrics. So it's this kind of 2.5D artwork. We have 2.5D games, if anyone play games, where you have strict 2D, you have 3D, and you have this like 2.5D. This is like, I think that is a 2.5D artwork. So I needed to make a frame for it. All of my tools that I would use to do that are in the UK. I couldn't really, I could go buy a bunch of tools, but I thought this isn't the ideal. So I guess who introduced me to a woodworker was Robert again. He introduced me to this lovely man, Pepe, who builds the absolute best kitchens I've ever seen. And in about 45 seconds, this saw is like bigger than a student flat. And he just fires it up and you want it how big? So that was amazing. I could go assemble the frame without having to try to either get really bad tools for cheap or get good tools and then have double anyways. So I started to put this together with sort of the final assembly. This is the power supply that I'm using, and then that's going to what's called a backplane, which is its own little circuit board that essentially just splits out all the power. So you have mains power here coming in, that's AC, getting turned into DC at 12 volts, which then gets farmed out to all the boards, and then each board regulates its own power down to 5 volts, which is what the boards run at. So I did all that, I plugged it in for a test, and I don't know if you can see up there, I got some smoke, because I set it to the wrong voltage. So that was a setback. That was annoying. Thankfully, these aren't hugely expensive. So I drove up to Ada, bought a new one that doesn't have a switch. One of the ones that just can tell what the power is and give you the right thing. Oh, and when this went, it tripped, I think, 5 circuit breakers in this building. I apologize for that. Anyway, so one other thing about this, the power aspect, is that early design decisions can really come back and bite you when you're building things. So I built this backplane early on because I was like, well, I'm just going to use this thing. And then it turned out that in order to use it, I had to crimp these pins. And I had to take the wire and put the pin onto it, and then put the pin inside this little connector, and then put the connector, and it was just the worst. It took me 2 nights of this sort of late night. And then one doesn't work, and you just have to cut it off and go again. It was the worst. So I'm definitely going to use a different connector system next time. Okay, so,
Sorry about that.
So yeah, it's my fault. I picked it. So this is the new power supply, some wiring. This is the complete frame. And I kind of like it just like that. I put it together and I thought, oh, that could just go on a wall, but I didn't stop there. You pop the boards out. I don't know if you saw it before. The boards come in a rectangle, kind of connected to the things you just pop. And then here they are all finally assembled. Very exciting moment. As I said, I made 21 boards. There's 18 here. I powered it up. There were 2 boards that weren't working. One of them just had one component just slightly out of place that I didn't notice before, so I fixed that. The other one just no idea, so I replaced it with a spare. Then another one was like just a bit weird, unreliable, so I replaced that with a spare. And in the end, I had 0 spare boards. I used every single one of the 21 boards, which is either perfect planning or near disaster. And I think it depends on your personality type, which one do you think that is. This is the whole thing, finally all working. It's very exciting. So as you can see, they're physically connected now. They have these kind of Masalia-like cables connecting them. And then Ludmilla and I carried it over to install into Forum. I don't have any photos of the actual installation into Forum, which was a bit stressful, but got up there. And it's hanging out there through Friday. So if you want to see it, that's just the first few minutes of its life. I have a poster over there, less words than I'm saying right now, but explaining kind of what the project's about. So I'll just quickly take you through just a little tour of the board, because I realize I know sort of what all the things do, but this is your chance to kind of know how this lines up. So just one of the kind of biological things is that it essentially, if you think of it as a cell, it has a nucleus, it has this ring, and the really important stuff is inside the ring, and then there's some pretty important stuff outside the ring. There's these external communication points on each arm. That's how it talks to its neighbors. There's these other LEDs that are these kind of subsidiary state indicators that just kind of flash. That's actually the thing that if I could just take off, I would right now. Those are problematic. The LEDs are too bright. That's like a thing I learned that I will fix in the future. Power supply, programming, and the kind of central brain right in the middle there. I'm gonna skip this one, just stuff I learned. So I'm very quickly going to talk through the way they work on the software side. There are 3 root animations that are all generative. I think of them as painting, rotation, and sparkle. Those are my names for them. The painting one has this kind of purling noise-based drift that just sort of slowly evolves. There's a rotating one, and there's this brief burst of light one. There's also a glow, and the way that those mutate is all based on ambient light level, but there's also just a really prominent sort of this pulse that you see on some of them, the speed of which relates to how bright it is. So that's the thing that changes over the course of the day. These animations are driven through color palettes, which is the way that the colors mutate. So here's a block diagram. When this is running, I have a function that's like once per board per some number of seconds. And that's how, if I want overall on the whole thing, if I want every 1 minute or every 5 minutes there to be a mutation or to be some event, this is how it works. So each board is like, cool, so, am I the chosen board this time? So it knows how big the whole population is. And so that, 1 out of 18 times, it's going to say yes, and the rest of the time it's not going to do anything. And then it uses this seconds value to say, like, what's the probability that this particular run loop is the time when I should do the thing? And if it is, it does whatever that thing is. So I use this for mutation, I use this for a few other kind of runtime checks. So it's going to do the thing. It's going to, in this case, the thing is, a mutation is going to happen in the runtime software. The mutation is either going to change which animation is happening, or something about one of the color palettes. So I mentioned there are 3 animations. One of them will turn on or off if it's that side. Where's my thing? Or if it's a palette, it'll pick a color, and then it'll decide based on light level. If it's bright, it's going to get warmer. If it's dark, it's going to get colder colors, warmer colors. Or if it's in the middle, it's just going to kind of drift randomly. So the way you see the colors change should depend on how bright it is. And so then it changes itself, but then it also sets this outgoing mutation thing. So then there's another subroutine that says, oh, there's something set in this outgoing mutation bucket. What I'm going to do is I'm going to encode that into a single 32-bit integer, which is this, which, if you're into that, I'm happy to talk about. I was so happy when it's one of those geeky sort of, it's just this one number that I can view. This one number represents 4 different things about what's going on. And then it just picks some random port that it knows that it's had communication on in the past. If it doesn't know any of them, then it just picks a random one. And then it tries a few times to see if it can send that to a neighbor and say, hey, I've decided to make the spinny stuff oranger. You should too. And then either the other one gets oranger or it doesn't. And then it just, carries on until the next mutation. The next steps for this, because the thing that you see in forum is, and I'm so happy to be at this point, and it's been a really amazing journey, but it is still essentially a prototype of the thing that I want to really build. So one of the next steps is looking into the possibility of a bit of further work on the prototype, refining some things about the software, and then looking for a longer term installation for that, or possibly a sale. The other thing is to look into funding for the larger version, getting institutional support, so that the big one can exist. So that would be a few more rounds of prototyping, and then 100, 200 of these boards going up, sort of doing the really big version. I want to circle back to this biomimetic board that I brought up at the beginning. This is where I start to open this up to you. Because there are so many different ways that something can be biomimetic, that it can imitate life. I'm going to go through some of them here, and then this is the part where after this I'm going to invite scientists to comment on this, or maybe add some more. Maybe some of these you think are not actually really valid interpretations of the biology that you study, so feel free to throw that out there. On the most basic level, the piece has within it this concept of self versus other, which is a kind of fundamental life thing. Like, is this me or is this not me? And having that within one artwork it's not unheard of, but it's not that if you think of a sort of standard artwork, it is a thing. It doesn't have multiple agents within it. The thing I mentioned before, the nucleus versus the non-central sort of cellular organelles. One thing I realized at the end is that, like us, like other life, there are sort of vestigial components on each organism that are there they're there because I put them there because they were useful once. And I try to clean up when I take something out, but for instance, all the infrared stuff, these boards can still talk to each other with infrared. They just aren't. They're talking using wires, but they have all the infrared stuff on them. Now, in the next edition, that will get selected out, but that particular phenotypic trait, is that the right thing? Nobody's really giving me either. Whatever, that thing is still on there. Here's a specific one. There's this amplifier stage in outgoing communication, which I just thought, oh yeah, we have in our auditory system, we have a biological amplification inside our cochlea, where the incoming sound waves are cellularly, they're amplified by specialized cells. And on an outgoing sense, it's just amplified physically. It is biological, but it's just the structure of our bodies to do that. There's some concepts of like, are you doing broadcast communication or are you doing directed communication, which is a thing that crops up in life. Emergent behavior, which I've talked about. Mutation, and the thing that happens with bacteria where you get lateral transfer of mutations. So with humans, if we experience a mutation, we only transfer it vertically to our children. But with bacteria, you can have, if I have a mutation, you can be like, oh, that's cool. Yoink, I'll have that. Or maybe there's accidental transfer or whatever. But that's, these are all these things they're not reproducing, so they're only able to do lateral transfer. And this one might be a reach, so I definitely encourage feedback on this. But there's kind of two types of mutation that can happen. There's this animation-driven mutation, which is like the really classical gene-based, like this thing, is it on or off? Like this type of animation, is it happening or not happening? And then there's this other one, the palette-based one, which I see as more like methylation, what's the other, epigenomics, where it's kind of, what do I say, like, it shifts the way that this thing's animation manifests. So it like, I have here like fuzzifying these concepts of like what the thing is, like this animation. Is this green spinny stuff, or is it just spinny stuff? Or is it, can it spin this way too? And whether, is it happening or not happening, it's become less of two discrete states and more of these kind of fuzzy clouds. I think that's it. For me, thanks. I guess I'll go back one. Oh, I have to do this again, don't I? So this is the point where I invite, I guess first let me invite scientists to say if these things, if you have anything you want to add or comment on or subtract or mock in any of these ideas about the biology or the project in general, and if people have questions or comments or ideas, feel free to add them. Does anyone have a science idea? Or a non-science? Do you want to MC this?
Yeah, okay. You see this. So how about the scientists you work with, Charlie?
Yeah, it is, I mean...
I think you work with Charlie, right?
Yeah, well... I don't want to put either of you on the spot necessarily.
I kind of did, sorry.
Right.
Shall we clap first, maybe?
Yes, of course.
Well, I think it was very exciting. We discussed at the beginning of the experience here, and we had interactions on networks and microbes and how they interact with each other, and on the similarities and analogies. And it was very interesting to exchange impressions, because when you talk about networks or interactions, it means something different for an artist or a scientist. And it's fascinating to see how these analogies and how these concepts of networking and interactions, communication can be depicting in that sense in an artistic way. And how this communication, how these properties, I'm very impressed how Charlie listed all these properties and was able to implement them in an art installation in such a very skillful way. And I'm very glad to see how inspiring that is, I think, for both ways. Possibly Charlie got some inspirations by talking to many different people and reading about it and all the biological parallels, and also for scientists to to realize the beauty and the possibilities of how art can inspire us to understand nature as well. So in that sense, I'm very pleased with this, and I think Charles has done a great work on that, and it's, yeah, I mean, I think it's wonderful. So,
Thanks.
all right.
Is there anything specific that comes up from your research? Or, I mean, no is an okay answer. It doesn't matter. You can force it. But do you see anything specific in the parallels aside from?
Oh,
Because from my side, it's like my understanding of the science is obviously surface level. It's
I mean, so for those who know, I'm a professor for systems and synthetic biology, and a lot of our work has to do with networks that we describe the whole living world as networks of interactions. And our cells, our bodies, we interact with each other as beings, like microbes interact with each other. Our cells interact with each other in many different ways, and that's very much how Charlie depicted them. So our work has a lot to do with that, and also the procedure in synthetic biology where one designs things first on a paper or on a computer. There's a very important part of the design phase before you get to the product, and that was maybe a large part of the time. So the design part, the build, when you were like building all your things, then the testing with a lot of things that go well, a lot of things that don't go well, and then learn from it. This what we call in synthetic biology the design, build, test, learn cycle, and that is really what we bring engineering. This is an engineering mindset brought to biology, in this case to art. So I absolutely see many parallels here, and I think it's stimulating to see them, coming back in an artistic way. Yes.
Cool.
Shall I give it to someone else? Diana's here.
So yeah, you also work with Charlie. Do you see anything from your field into Charlie's artwork? Well, yes. First of all, I'm very impressed with the outcome. So I think it's really cool and nice idea from the beginning. I thought already this, but it's nice to see how you elaborate it became. And you are saying that you have a superficial knowledge of biology, but when I look at it, I think well, it's actually quite like so well what is happening in parallel and all the connections of the science, like people observation. And so that's really nice. But another thing that I find very important, and also for scientists, is how it go beyond what we actually see and imagine, because I think a big part of science many times focus, for example, on optimization, but then we are actually not creating things new, we are just optimizing what is there. And seeing something new or using your imagination to see something from a different perspective or from, something that is probably silly to think about, but it might make sense when you understand it what it's overall. So I think there's a connection with science and art, because we should not just focus on what we see, but also in constructing, thinking on silly ideas, and maybe coming up with something completely different. And in a way, that's why I'm also impressed, because I also have my own ideas when we told about your ideas we discussed, and I already thought it was very nice, but now I see it's much more than that, and it's really a nice piece of work, and I think really nice.
You want it in your house?
I would like to have it, well,
Yeah.
I think it's nice to have it in our building here at university.
Cool. A thing I forgot to do that I'll do now is I have prototype 3 here that I can pass around to people if you want to see it up close, because one of the things about forum is you can't touch it, which is on purpose. I don't want people basically breaking it when I'm not around. But please don't poke it too much. But if you want to sort of see how it happens, there's one that isn't running too that.
So one thing that I mentioned at the beginning was, because now you constructed this in a plan, and one thing I thought at the beginning is that it would be more in a structure. So your idea from the beginning was always to have it in a panel like that.
No, I think having it on.
Kind of more three-dimensional structure.
Yeah, I think there's so many different. Like one of the early ideas I had for where it would go was in Atlas. They're the the walkways and having it on the underside of those. So you sort of look up and you can see, I think there's 3 or 4 walkways. There's not as much student traffic there, but I think that's, you know, that's one. I think in Forum you have so many huge, and in Orion you have these huge sort of beautiful concrete walls that would be amazing to have one of them just covered with them. And especially I think like a curved wall or like 2 walls at a right angle, having them there and being able to kind of go across it. So yeah, let's make that happen. That's who we talk to.
Hi, Charlie, thanks. I'm Ulrich. We're going to meet tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So then we're going to see what's in it together, maybe. Thanks, very nice stuff. I thought I would be disappointed, would have been disappointed when you were only talking about the static system you were showing. Because thinking about living organisms, they move around, they replicate, they do stuff together. But on the other hand, the original concept of this artist in residence thing was that we would connect science groups and connect different buildings together. So if you can scale this up to a different level and use the whole campus as your system and make a building into one of your devices, so we can really get people connecting without people moving, because that's really the big problem, that we are not connecting by having the people really collaborating together. But if we can visualize it somehow, that would be a very nice idea.
Yeah.
So we should ask permission to the rector to use the whole campus as.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I get you guys helping me with that?
I'm not sure if the workplace is big enough to make this kind of stuff. You can expand it.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
But very cool. Thanks, and looking forward to talking to you tomorrow.
Does anybody else have a question for Charlie about his work or?
I love the throwable mic. That's. I tried. Nice work. Especially on the type where it's really impressive what you've done. But I was wondering, you just mentioned that you don't want people to break stuff. However, I can imagine that in terms of getting your audience to actually look at your artwork and learn something from it, wouldn't it be beneficial to have a way to interact with the organism that you're making? Like, yeah, that's a really good point. There's one of the reasons that I really wanted to do infrared is because you could then, it enables this thing where you could, so my concept for part of that was people could bring just a remote from anything that uses infrared, sort of, you know, pointed at part of the colony that would do something, and then you could see the thing that you did start to spread. And I'd really like to bring that back in terms of the scope of the sort of the time that I had to work with here. It had to get cut. But yeah, I think the having it in a space. So the thing with Forum is that it's a completely unmonitored space. If this were in a gallery, you would have it right there. You wouldn't have to worry about it being sort of, 10 minutes before building closed and someone decides to. Yeah, I don't want to malign students, but I was a student once, and these things sometimes happen. So I think, in a gallery, you have a thing where people, you take your phone out of your pocket, turn a flashlight on, and you change the ambient light for it. I have a further concept for it being like an outdoor thing. So you epoxy so the concept for that, just briefly, is like a concrete ring that would be sort of bench height. So it would be like furniture, art, like you sit on a gathering place kind of thing. And to have them in sort of spaced around it on the inside and outside. So walking by at night, you could just see them. But if you're on the inside, you could see the whole ring happening. And then those would be, they'd be encased, so it obviously need to be waterproof. But that would also then let you, sort of be right there and interact with it and shine a flashlight on it or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a good, letting it be interactive is, I'm for that.
I'm curious to hear, according to you, how close do you think you come from to a life form? Not only this prototype, but maybe the idea that you envision in
Yeah, I think the big barrier to it really becoming like a life form is reproduction. There's no way for it to physically, nothing that I'm doing is anywhere, it's not moved at all toward it being able to make another one of itself. And there isn't really technology to sort of 3D print a circuit, so you can sort of have a big one that makes another one of itself or something. So yeah, unfortunately, that's like a hard stop in terms of it actually being that. If you were to do the whole thing in software, you could have, but then it's all software, and you don't have a way to instantiate it. You could do something where you have 500 of them over here, off in a room, and then you have the alive ones, and then when they reproduce, one sort of scurries out and joins, right? And so it's like, the ones out here are the living ones, and the other ones exist, but they're off stage, right? And so you have sort of where it's happening. I'm just thinking of this right now, this is a pre-existing idea. So you could have something like that, and then you could have them sort of, consuming and reproducing and doing the things that life needs to do. But you still wouldn't be able to really change the physical characteristics. You could fake that too by having a ton of different potential characteristics and having them use different ones. But yeah, life is just too awesome. There's like...
And it also I was thinking because of when you mentioned this machine, right, that assembles the circuit boards automatically and really fast, that maybe at some point the boards will be able to order themselves.
I love it. I totally want to do that. I need a company to sponsor that has one of those €3 million machines. But yeah, that would be great. I think I need faster communication. Place order. That would be great. One more? I don't know what the thing is. Is that an important call? Anybody else? If not, thank you so much.